It was a few months ago when we moved into what we thought was our dream home. My wife, Emma, and I had been looking for a place for a while, and when we found this one, it felt perfect. It was just big enough for our family. Our two kids, Lily and Max, were excited about the idea of their own rooms, a big backyard, and even a pool. It wasn't too far from where we used to live, but it felt like a fresh start. The kind of fresh start people talk about when they imagine their family finally settling into a home they'll stay in forever. The house was older, built sometime in the 80s, but it had a charm to it. The walls were warm with colors I couldn't really name, but they gave the place a cozy feel. The neighborhood was quiet, and everyone seemed friendly. People waved when they walked by, and we had a couple of neighbors bring over casseroles and homemade cookies to welcome us. It was everything we needed and more. The kind of place where you couldn't help but imagine growing old and making memories. I remember sitting outside on the back porch one evening with Emma, watching the kids run around. The sun was setting in the west, casting a soft orange light over the yard, and for that moment, I thought we'd found our forever home. Things started out perfectly. The kids adjusted quickly to their new rooms. Lily loved decorating hers with all sorts of posters and toys, and Max couldn't get enough of the backyard. Emma spent hours in the kitchen, getting familiar with the new space. I was happy, feeling like I'd made the right decision for our family. The house wasn't perfect. It had its quirks, like the old creaky floors and the strange smell that lingered in the basement, but nothing that stood out enough to make us question our choice. I didn't even mind mowing the lawn every weekend. It became a routine. I took pride in it. This was our place now. Weeks passed, and everything stayed the same. The kids played outside almost every day, and Emma started making dinner on a regular schedule. I got used to the sound of the floorboards creaking when I walked through the house, and at night, we all got comfortable with our routines. I was happy. There was nothing out of the ordinary, no reason to think that anything could disrupt the peace. But then, one night, everything changed. It was a Wednesday, around midnight. Emma and I had just finished watching a movie, and the kids were already asleep. The house was dark, quiet except for the occasional sound of the wind rustling the trees outside. I had just gotten up to lock the front door when I heard a noise. At first, it was faint, like a soft thud against the door. I stopped, listened, and waited for it to happen again. It didn't. The sound was gone, and I told myself it was nothing. Probably a car trunk slamming in the distance, or some branch tapping against the window. But still, something about it nagged at me. I went to check the back door, making sure it was locked, and that's when I heard it again. This time, the sound was louder, footsteps, heavy ones, moving across the yard. I froze for a moment, straining my ears to hear better. The footsteps got closer, and my heart started to race. I couldn't see anything from where I was, but I knew someone was out there. There was no mistaking the sound of heavy boots stomping against the grass. I rushed to the back door and locked it, then went to check the front, but by the time I got there, everything was quiet again. I stood by the door for a moment, listening. The whole house felt like it was holding its breath. I figured I was being paranoid. Maybe it was just the wind, or perhaps someone walking by. I went to bed and told Emma about the noise, but she shrugged it off, half asleep. "You're probably just hearing things," she mumbled before drifting off. I tried to ignore the feeling of unease that lingered. The kids were still asleep, and the house was as peaceful as it had been since we moved in. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It wasn't until the next morning that I realized just how wrong I was. It started small, like most things do. I woke up early, like I always did, and went to make coffee in the kitchen. I noticed that the front door, which I had locked the night before, was now slightly ajar. I froze, staring at the door, trying to make sense of it. Had I forgotten to lock it? But no, I was sure I'd locked it. I would have remembered. I walked over to it, cautiously, and checked the lock. It was still intact, and there were no signs of forced entry. It didn't make sense. Stronger, like an itch that I couldn't scratch. By the time the kids went to bed that night, I found myself checking every door and window before I could relax. I didn't sleep well, kept waking up, hearing noises that weren't there. It was almost as if the house was trying to tell me something. But what? As the days I closed the door, locked it again, and went about my morning routine. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The rest of the day was normal. Lily and Max played outside. Emma made lunch. But in the back of my mind, I kept thinking about that door. The feeling didn't go away. In fact, it grew past. The feeling didn't get any better. In fact, it only seemed to intensify. I started hearing more noises at night. Things that didn't make sense. Footsteps in the hallway. The creak of the floorboards when no one was around. It was as if the house was alive, breathing in the silence and whispering its secrets. But when I mentioned it to Emma, she just laughed it off. "You're working too hard," she'd say. "You need some rest." I wanted to believe that. I really did. But there was something in the back of my mind, a small voice telling me that this wasn't just exhaustion. One evening, after dinner, I was in the living room, watching TV while the kids played upstairs. Emma was tidying up the kitchen, humming a tune. That's when I heard it again, the thud, followed by heavy footsteps. This time, I didn't hesitate. I got up immediately, walked toward the front door, and listened. The footsteps were getting closer. I could feel my heart beating faster. The house was quiet again, but I wasn't about to make the same mistake twice. I walked to the kitchen to check the back door and the windows. Everything was locked, just as it should be. But the noise kept coming. Thud. Step. Step. I looked at the clock. Almost midnight. Emma was still in the kitchen, unaware of the sounds. I told myself it was just my nerves, that it was probably nothing. But I couldn't shake the feeling. It was a strange, gnawing sensation deep in my gut, one that told me something wasn't right. I walked around the house, checking every room, every window, every lock. The house felt cold. The kind of cold that made you feel like you were being watched. I walked up the stairs and knocked on Lily and Max's doors. Both of them were fast asleep. I stood in their rooms for a moment, watching them breathe peacefully, their little faces relaxed in sleep. I felt a sense of comfort, knowing they were okay. But I couldn't ignore what was going on. I went back downstairs, feeling the weight of every step I took on the creaky floor. When I reached the bottom, I stood in the hallway, listening again. The silence was deafening. For a moment, I thought the noise had stopped, but then I heard it, the sound of the back door slowly creaking open. My blood ran cold. My first instinct was to go upstairs, to grab the kids and run. But I didn't. Instead, I walked to the back door and stood there, frozen, as it slowly swung open on its own. I knew I had locked it, but now it was open, just wide enough for someone to slip through. I ran to grab the flashlight I kept in the drawer by the door. As I shined it outside, I saw nothing. Just the empty yard, dark and still. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a shadow dart across the driveway. My heart skipped a beat, and I rushed to close the door, locking it tightly. I was shaking now, trying to calm my breathing, but my mind was racing. Who was outside? What were they doing? I called the police. They promised to send someone right away, but by the time they arrived, there was no sign of anyone. They looked around the yard, checked the perimeter, but found nothing. The only thing they found were a few muddy footprints outside the back door, leading into the yard and then disappearing. The officer seemed baffled, but he reassured me that it was probably just someone who got scared off. "We'll patrol the area tonight," he said. "You should be fine." But I didn't feel fine. I couldn't shake the image of that shadow, moving so quickly across the driveway. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't the wind. There was something or someone out there. The next day, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I went to work, but the feeling of unease followed me. I kept checking my phone, waiting for the police to call back with some new lead or information. But nothing came. The silence of the house was more unsettling than before, and I found myself checking the locks again when I got home, even though I knew they were secure. Emma could tell something was wrong. She asked if I was okay, but I didn't know how to explain the constant fear gnawing at me. How could I tell her that our new home felt like a prison? That night, after we put the kids to bed, I couldn't sleep. I stayed awake, listening to the house, straining to hear anything unusual. But everything was quiet, like it always was. The only sound was the occasional creak of the house settling. It was as if the house itself was waiting for something. Around 3 a.m., I finally decided to check the doors one more time. I was about to head upstairs when I heard it, the sound of the back door opening again. I grabbed the flashlight and rushed to the kitchen, my mind racing. I knew I had locked that door, and yet, here it was, creaking open slowly, like something or someone was testing it. I moved cautiously toward the door, my hand gripping the flashlight so hard my knuckles were white. As I stepped closer, I felt the temperature drop. I could see my breath. The air seemed to thicken with fear. I shone the flashlight outside, but there was nothing there. The yard was empty. The night was still. But then, the door slammed shut on its own, as though pushed by an unseen force. I jumped back, my heart hammering in my chest. I locked the door again, every lock, every bolt. I went upstairs to check on the kids, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. Something was in the house with us. I didn't know what it was or why it was here, but it wasn't going to stop. I froze, my body rigid with fear. The voice was faint, but it was unmistakable. "Daddy." It wasn't Lily's voice or Max's. It was a different tone, one that didn't belong to any of us. I shot up from the couch, panic coursing through me. I went to the hallway, calling out to the kids, but there was no response. They were both fast asleep in their rooms, oblivious to the unsettling voice. I couldn't explain it. It wasn't a noise from outside. It was coming from the house itself. The feeling of being watched grew stronger, like someone was standing just behind me, breathing down my neck. I rushed to their rooms, checked on them again, even though I knew they were fine. Everything was still, but the voice lingered in my head. "Daddy," it echoed, soft and haunting, like it had been calling to me from a distance. The next day, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I called a locksmith to come and change all the locks in the house, just to be sure. Emma thought I was being paranoid, but I didn't care. I needed to feel secure again, to know that no one could get inside. I wanted the locks to be changed, the doors to be sealed tight. I didn't tell her about the voice, though. I didn't want to add more to her plate. She already had enough on her mind. The locksmith came later that afternoon. I watched him work as he replaced the deadbolts and reinforced the windows. He said it would be an extra measure of security, and I agreed, even though deep down, I knew it wouldn't solve the problem. The house had already changed. Something had already shifted, and no amount of new locks could fix that. When the locksmith left, I felt a brief sense of relief, but it didn't last long. That night, the house felt different. It felt cold, almost hollow. The silence was deafening, but it wasn't the peaceful kind of silence. It was heavy, like something was pressing down on me, making it hard to breathe. The kids went to bed without a hitch, but that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept staring at the ceiling, listening for any sound that might break the quiet. Every creak of the floor, every slight shift in the house, sent my mind racing. What was it? What did it want? Was it the house? Was it something else? Around 2 a.m., I heard a noise, something scraping against the floorboards. I shot up, my heart racing. I grabbed my phone and checked the time. 2:03. I was sure I hadn't imagined it. The sound wasn't random. It was deliberate, slow, like someone, or something, was dragging itself across the floor. I got up, my body stiff with fear, and walked to the hallway. My hands were shaking as I reached for the light switch. I clicked it on, but there was nothing there. The hallway was empty. The kids were still asleep in their rooms, and the house was still. But the sound, it kept echoing in my mind, growing louder, more real. I walked back to the living room, my mind spinning, trying to make sense of it. I sat down on the couch, feeling helpless. Why was this happening? What was I supposed to do? I couldn't stay in this house, but I also couldn't leave. Emma would never understand. She'd think I was losing it, and maybe, just maybe, I was. The days passed, but the unease didn't go away. If anything, it grew. The noises got worse. It wasn't just footsteps now. It was things moving in the house when no one was there. I'd wake up to find the kitchen lights on, the fridge door slightly open. I'd check the back door, and the lock would be turned, but the door itself would be ajar, just enough for someone to slip through. I tried to convince myself that it was nothing, that I was just being paranoid. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. Something wasn't right with this house. I started to lose track of time. The days blurred together, each one feeling like a slow-motion replay of the last. The noises in the house had become more frequent and more unsettling. I would hear scraping sounds from the walls, footsteps pacing in the hallway when I knew the house was empty, or the sound of something being dragged across the floor in the dead of night. But every time I went to investigate, I found nothing. No signs of forced entry, no explanations, just the eerie silence of a house that felt more like a trap than a home. I tried telling Emma, but she brushed it off. "You're exhausted," she would say, her voice warm but tired. "You've been working too much." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But every time I closed my eyes, I could hear those footsteps, feel the chill in the air, the sense that we weren't truly alone. I couldn't explain it, but I knew something was wrong. This house wasn't safe. One evening, as we were having dinner, I noticed the kids acting differently. Lily, who was usually talkative and full of energy, had become unusually quiet. Max was clingy, his eyes darting around nervously. At first, I thought it was just another phase, but something about the way they looked at each other told me it wasn't. It was like they were scared, like they knew something was wrong but couldn't explain it. After dinner, I sat them down, trying to keep my voice calm. "Hey, what's going on? You both seem a little off." Max looked up at me with wide eyes, but it was Lily who spoke first. "We don't like the house, Daddy," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. It feels like someone's watching us." I froze. My heart skipped a beat. Had they noticed it too? I couldn't deny it anymore. It wasn't just me. "What do you mean, sweetheart? Is there something specific?" I drove into town the next afternoon, the engine of the car humming in the quiet. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the small town as I passed through the streets. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I knew I had to find something, anything, that could explain what was going on. The feeling of unease hadn't left me since that night. The house, once our dream home, now felt like a trap, and I wasn't sure how long we could stay there without something snapping. The local historian, Mrs. Larkin, was an older woman who had lived in the town her whole life. She ran a small antiquities shop tucked away on Main Street. The shop smelled of old books and dust, and as I walked in, the soft creak of the wooden floor under my boots reminded me of how much history was wrapped up in this place. Mrs. Larkin greeted me from behind the counter with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "What can I do for you, young man?" she asked, her voice warm but weary. I could tell she had seen her fair share of people looking for answers in the past. Her eyes lingered on me for a moment, as if she could see the burden I was carrying. "I need to know about the history of a house," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's in the neighborhood I moved into. It's an old place. I'm starting to think there might be something wrong with it. Something I can't explain." Mrs. Larkin's expression shifted. She set down the book she had been reading and motioned for me to sit. "What kind of something?" she asked, her voice lowering slightly. It was clear she'd dealt with strange requests before, but there was something about my tone that made her take me seriously. "I don't know," I said, my voice breaking slightly. "There are noises. Footsteps when no one's there. The kids have been hearing things too. I've even heard a voice in the house. It's like someone is calling me, but there's no one there." I hesitated, looking down at my hands, unsure if I should even be telling her this. But I had to. I needed answers. Mrs. Larkin studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. "There's always a history to these things," she said. "Every house, every building has a story. Sometimes it's just forgotten by the people who live there. But the walls, the floorboards, they remember. They hold on to things that happened long before any of us were born." Her words sent a shiver down my spine. I had always been a practical person, someone who believed in logic and reason, but the fear in her voice made me question everything. I'm not saying it's haunted, she continued, her voice low and steady. But there's a place in that neighborhood, a house that's been there longer than the others. The one you're talking about, it has a history, not a happy one. I leaned forward, eager to hear more. What happened there? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Mrs. Larkin glanced around the shop, as if making sure no one was listening. It's not something people like to talk about, she said, lowering her voice. But there was a family that lived there a long time ago, just after the house was built. A young couple with a child. The child, well, the child wasn't well. She was sick, very sick. The doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong with her. She didn't speak, couldn't walk, couldn't really do much of anything. And the parents, they tried everything, but nothing helped. I listened intently, hanging on to every word. What happened to the child? I asked. They say the parents couldn't take it anymore, Mrs. Larkin continued, her voice soft but steady. One day, the child just disappeared. The neighbors said the parents were acting strange after that, distant, paranoid, like they were hiding something. No one knew for sure what happened to the girl, but after a few months, they moved away. The house stood empty for years. I could feel the weight of her words pressing down on me. But what does that have to do with the house now? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The house never really recovered from that, she said. It's like the sadness and fear of the parents, the loss of that child. It's still in the walls. Some people say that when a place carries too much pain, it changes. The air feels thick, the house feels wrong. And it's not just this one. It's happened before, in other houses with similar histories. I felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. The house wasn't just a building. It had a story, a history, one that I couldn't ignore anymore. And now, I was part of it. My family was part of it. I didn't know if that was good or bad, but it was true. I don't know what to do, I said, my voice cracking. I want to leave. I want to protect my family. But we can't just pick up and go. It's our home. Mrs. Larkin nodded. I understand. It's not always easy to walk away from something that's supposed to be yours. But sometimes you have to face the past if you want peace. The house isn't going to change, not unless you let it. You can't let it control you. Her words stuck with me as I drove back home. I didn't have any answers, but I felt a sense of clarity. There was something wrong with the house, something I couldn't explain, but now I knew it wasn't just in my head. It was real. When I got home, I didn't tell Emma what I'd learned. I didn't want to scare her. But as I walked into the house, I felt a new resolve building inside me. I had to protect my family. I had to fix this. And I didn't know how, but I was going to find out. That night, I couldn't sleep. The weight of what Mrs. Larkin had told me pressed heavily on my mind. The house, our home, had a history, a painful one, and that history was now intertwined with ours. I didn't know if knowing this made things better or worse, but there was no denying the connection. The house had always felt off, but now it felt like something had been awakened. The kids were asleep, unaware of the dark shadow hanging over our home. Emma, too, was sleeping soundly beside me, her steady breathing a reminder of how much I wanted to protect her from whatever was happening. But how could I? I had no answers. No way of explaining the voices, the shadows, the footsteps. It was like something was lurking just out of sight, waiting. Around 3 a.m., I finally gave up trying to sleep. The house was still, too still. I got up, quietly slipping out of bed, trying not to disturb Emma. The house creaked around me as I made my way downstairs, the faint glow of the streetlights casting shadows through the windows. I went to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and sat at the table, staring out the window into the dark yard. The air felt thick, as if the world outside had been frozen in time, holding its breath. I couldn't shake the thought that I was being watched. It was a quiet sensation, one that crept up slowly, like a chill that ran down my spine when I wasn't paying attention. Every small sound, the rustling of leaves outside, the hum of the refrigerator, seemed magnified in the silence of the house. It was as if the walls themselves were listening, waiting for something to happen. I decided to check on the kids. I couldn't explain why. Maybe it was instinct, or maybe I just needed to see them, to reassure myself that they were safe. I crept upstairs, my feet barely making a sound on the wooden floor. I pushed open the door to Lily's room first, peering inside. She was sound asleep, her face peaceful, her body curled up under the covers. I felt a small sense of relief, but it didn't last. I turned to Max's room and opened the door. Max wasn't in his bed. I froze in the doorway, staring into the darkness. My heart skipped a beat. I rushed inside, flicking on the light. The room was empty, the bed neatly made, but there was no sign of Max. Panic gripped me. Where could he be? I called out his name softly, hoping to hear him answer from under the bed or in the closet, but there was nothing. No sound. I checked the rest of the house, calling his name, but there was no response. My mind raced as I imagined the worst. What if someone had taken him? What if the house had done something to him? I didn't know what was real anymore. The house that had once been our sanctuary was now a place of fear. Then I heard it, a soft giggle, barely audible, coming from the attic. My blood ran cold. The attic. We hadn't even used it. There was no reason for Max to be up there. My heart pounded in my chest as I turned toward the stairs, my legs heavy with dread. I knew I had to go up there. I had to find Max, no matter what. I tried to keep up appearances for Emma's sake. She was starting to notice how on edge I was, but I kept telling her that I was just stressed, that it was the move, the new house, the change in our lives. I didn't want to burden her with what I'd seen in the attic. I couldn't. I couldn't let her think I was losing my mind, even though, deep down, I felt like I was. We didn't talk about the strange events. I didn't want to bring them up, and Emma didn't ask. It was like the house had cast a thick, invisible wall around us, keeping us from speaking about what was really going on. But I knew something had to be done. I spent hours during the day researching the house's history. I couldn't shake the conversation with Mrs. Larkin, and I kept going back to it. Something about the little girl, the way she'd whispered to me, felt too real. She wasn't just a figment of my imagination. I knew it. And I was beginning to believe that whatever had happened to her in that house was connected to what was happening now. The evening was drawing near, and I couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom. Every time the wind blew outside, it felt like it was pushing the walls closer together, suffocating me with its weight. The kids were playing in the living room, and Emma was in the kitchen prepping dinner. I tried to focus on them, to feel normal, but the house kept pulling my attention back to the attic, to the dark corners, to the oppressive silence that hung like a cloud over everything. Then, out of nowhere, the phone rang. I picked it up, half expecting it to be a wrong number. But when I heard the voice on the other end, my blood ran cold. "Mr. Thomas?" the voice asked. "This is Detective Harris from the local police department. We need to speak with you." I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. "What's this about?" "There's been a break-in in your neighborhood. A robbery. But there's something you need to know," Detective Harris said, his tone serious. "We've been investigating the area, and we've found something strange. The house you live in, Mr. Thomas, it's been linked to several other incidents in the past." My heart skipped a beat. "What kind of incidents?" I asked, my voice trembling despite myself. "We've been tracking a series of strange occurrences in homes nearby. People hearing voices, seeing figures, strange noises in the middle of the night. The break-ins don't seem random. We think there's something going on with the houses in your area, yours included." I didn't know what to say. My mind raced, trying to process his words. It was happening again. What had started as a quiet suspicion now felt like an undeniable truth. The house wasn't just haunted. It was pulling things into it, things that weren't supposed to be there. "I've heard strange things in the house," I said, almost ashamed to admit it. But I didn't know who to talk to. "What do I do?" The detective paused for a moment before responding. "We need to investigate further. I'd advise you to stay cautious. Don't go into the attic. Don't disturb anything that seems out of place, and make sure your family stays safe. We'll be in touch soon." I hung up, my mind spinning. I wasn't sure if I should feel relieved or terrified. The police were aware of the incidents now. They knew something was happening. But what did that mean for us? For our family? The detective hadn't said much, but the warning in his voice was enough. I couldn't ignore this anymore. I walked into the living room, where Emma was sitting on the couch, reading a book. The kids were still playing, but there was an eerie calm in the room. I watched them for a moment, feeling a pang of fear in my chest. This was supposed to be our safe place. But it wasn't. Not anymore. "Emma," I began, my voice shaky. "I need to talk to you about something." She looked up at me, concern flickering across her face. "What's going on? You've been acting distant lately. Is everything okay?" I hesitated. Should I tell her everything? Should I explain about the voices, the shadow in the attic, the feeling that something was wrong? Or would she think I was losing it? I could see the doubt in her eyes, the same doubt I had seen in the mirror every day since this started. But I couldn't keep this from her. I think there's something wrong with this house," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Something strange is happening. I don't know how to explain it, but it's not just me. The kids have heard it too. The footsteps, the whispers. Emma, we need to get out of here." Her face went pale, her expression turning from confusion to concern. "What do you mean? What are you talking about?" "I don't know, but something is here, and I'm afraid for us. For you, for the kids. I don't want to wait until it's too late." Emma stood up, walking over to me. I don't know what you're talking about. This house is fine. It's just a house, Mark." But I could see the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. She wasn't convinced, but she didn't know what to say either. I could see the fear creeping in, the same fear I had felt every time the house settled into silence. Emma didn't respond immediately. She stood up, walked to the window, and stared out at the darkening sky, her face thoughtful. The tension in the room was palpable, like the calm before a storm. Finally, she turned to me. "Who do you think can help us, Mark? The police are already aware, but they don't know what to do. What if there's no solution? What if it's just the way things are?" I could see the fear in her eyes. It was the same fear I felt, the fear of facing the unknown, of confronting something we couldn't understand. But I couldn't give up. Not now. Not when the stakes were this high. Not when our family's safety was on the line. "I don't know, Emma," I said, running a hand through my hair, feeling the weight of the uncertainty. "But we can't ignore it anymore. I've been reading about these kinds of things, hauntings, curses, whatever you want to call it. There's got to be a way to break whatever's happening here." She walked over to me and placed a hand on my shoulder. "We'll figure it out. We always do. But we can't do this alone. We need to be strong together. For the kids." I nodded, appreciating her strength, but deep down, I knew the truth. We were already in too deep. It wasn't just about being strong. It wasn't just about holding it together for the kids. It was about facing something dark and unknown, and I wasn't sure we had the power to defeat it. The following days were a blur. We lived in a constant state of heightened awareness, our eyes always darting to the corners of rooms, the shadows in the hallways. I couldn't bring myself to go back to the attic. I couldn't even bring myself to walk past it. But I knew I had to. We couldn't live in fear forever. The kids noticed the change. Lily, ever the perceptive one, asked why I kept checking the locks, why I seemed on edge all the time. Max was quieter than usual, his playful spirit dimmed by something I couldn't name. It broke my heart to see them so affected. They shouldn't have to live like this. None of us should. That afternoon, I went to the phone book. It felt old-fashioned, searching for answers in a book that seemed as outdated as the house itself, but I didn't know where else to turn. I needed help. I needed someone who could tell me how to get rid of whatever was haunting us, something that had been here long before we moved in. I found a name. Father Lawrence, a local priest who had dealt with cases of possession and hauntings. I didn't believe in all of that. At least, I didn't think I did, but I had to try. I couldn't let this go on any longer. I called the number listed, my fingers trembling as I dialed. The phone rang twice before someone picked up. A deep, calm voice answered. "Father Lawrence," he said. "Hello, Father," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "My name is Mark Thomas. I'm having some problems with my house. It's been strange. Noises, things moving on their own. My family is being affected, and I don't know what to do. I was wondering if you could help." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and then he spoke, his voice low but firm. "I've heard of such things. Can you come to my office tomorrow? We can discuss it further. But be warned, Mr. Thomas, sometimes what we think is a simple problem is much deeper, much darker." His words hung in the air, and a chill ran through me. Darker? What did that mean? I couldn't afford to second-guess myself now. We had to act. For Emma. For the kids. "I'll be there tomorrow," I said, my voice determined. "Thank you, Father. I'll bring my family." The next day, we drove to Father Lawrence's office, the atmosphere in the car tense and quiet. Emma kept glancing over at me, her eyes filled with concern, but she didn't say anything. I could feel the weight of the unknown pressing down on us all. Father Lawrence's office was a small, quiet space, tucked away in the back of a church that had stood for generations. The smell of incense hung in the air, and the faint sound of church bells could be heard from outside. It felt like stepping into another time, a place where the world was quieter, slower, more at peace. But that peace was not something we felt anymore. Father Lawrence greeted us at the door, his tall frame casting a shadow across the room. He led us to a seat and sat across from us, his dark eyes studying each of us with a calm, knowing gaze. He didn't say anything right away, but there was something about him, something in the way he carried himself, that made me feel like he had seen this before, like he had dealt with this kind of thing countless times. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low but confident. "Tell me what's been happening in your home." I took a deep breath and began to tell him everything. The footsteps, the whispers, the cold drafts, the figure in the attic, the little girl who had spoken to me. I didn't leave anything out. As I spoke, Emma's grip tightened on my hand. The kids were quiet, watching Father Lawrence with wide eyes. When I finished, the priest sat back, his fingers steepled in front of his face. "This house," he said quietly, "has been a place of pain for a long time. The Harding family's loss, what happened to their daughter, is just the beginning. There is something in your home, Mr. Thomas. Something that has been feeding off the fear of those who live there. You are not the first to experience these things." I swallowed hard. "What can we do? How can we stop it?" Father Lawrence looked at me, his gaze serious. "It will not be easy. The house has been cursed, but there are ways to rid it of the darkness. But you must be willing to face what's inside. Are you ready?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes." Father Lawrence's words echoed in my mind as we left his office. The air outside felt heavier, charged with a tension I hadn't felt before. The weight of his words hung over me. "The house has been cursed." Those were the words he used, and as much as I wanted to deny it, deep down, I knew he was right. The strange occurrences, the whispers in the dark, the figure in the attic, it was all connected, and we were living in it. The house was more than just a building. It had become something alive, something that fed off our fear, that trapped us inside its walls. "We have to do it," I said to Emma as we drove home. "Father Lawrence is going to help us. We have to face this. We can't keep running from it." Emma didn't say anything right away. She just stared out the window, her hand resting on her lap. I knew she was scared. I was too. But there was no turning back now. I had promised the kids we would keep them safe, and I wasn't about to break that promise. That night, we gathered in the living room after the kids went to bed. The house felt colder than usual. The silence was suffocating. I had never truly understood the power of silence until now. In this house, it wasn't peaceful. It was oppressive. The walls felt like they were closing in around us, and the air seemed thick with something I couldn't name. "We need to be ready," I said, breaking the silence. "Father Lawrence said it's not going to be easy. He said we have to face the darkness in this house, whatever it is. We can't run from it." Emma nodded, but her expression was far from convinced. "What if it's too much? What if we can't do it?" I reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "We don't have a choice. We can't keep living like this. The kids are scared, and I can't protect them if we just sit here and do nothing." We have to fight back. We sat there in the quiet for what felt like hours, each of us lost in our thoughts, the weight of what was coming pressing down on us. I kept hearing the noises in my head, the footsteps, the whispers, the cold drafts. I couldn't escape them, and I wasn't sure I could escape this house either. The next day, Father Lawrence came to our house. The sun was barely up, and the house was still, too still, as if it were holding its breath. I met him at the door, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew he was here to help, but a part of me was afraid. What if he couldn't help us? What if whatever was in this house was too strong? Father Lawrence stepped inside, his presence calm but imposing. He was holding a small leather bag, which I assumed contained the tools he would need to perform whatever ritual he had in mind. He didn't speak immediately. He just stood in the entryway, looking around the house as if he were taking in its every detail. "This house has seen much suffering," he said quietly, his voice carrying a weight that sent chills down my spine. "It's not just the Harding family. There have been others before them. People who lived here, people who tried to make this house a home. But the darkness, whatever it is, has always been here." I swallowed hard. What do we do? How do we stop it? Father Lawrence turned to me, his expression somber. "We have to confront it. We have to make the house face its past. The pain, the fear, the loss, it's all trapped here. And it's feeding on you, on your family." He walked past me, moving deeper into the house, his eyes scanning the rooms. He stopped by the stairs, his gaze fixed on the hallway. "The attic," he murmured. "It is the source." I felt a shiver run down my spine. It was the attic. I knew it. It had always been the attic. The place where the figure had appeared, where the whispers seemed to come from. The place that had felt so wrong since the moment we moved in. "I'll need you to stay here," Father Lawrence said, turning back to me. "You and your family need to remain in this room while I work. This isn't something you can help with. You need to stay safe." I nodded, though I wasn't sure if I could stay still. The house was pulling at me, urging me to face whatever was in the attic, to confront the figure I had seen. But I stayed where I was, trying to trust Father Lawrence. He knew what he was doing, didn't he? Father Lawrence walked toward the stairs. I watched him go, my heart in my throat. He disappeared from view, and I was left with the sounds of the house settling, the occasional creak of the floor, the soft hum of the air conditioner running in the background. It was too quiet, too still. Emma sat beside me, her hand gripping mine tightly. She didn't speak, but I could feel the fear radiating off her. I wanted to say something comforting, to tell her that everything would be okay, but I couldn't. Not when I wasn't sure of that myself. We sat there for what felt like an eternity, but finally, Father Lawrence reappeared. His face was pale, his eyes grim. I could see the toll the house had taken on him. He had seen something up there, something that had shaken him. "I've done what I can," he said, his voice low. "But this house will not give up easily. The darkness is strong. It will fight back. You need to leave." "Leave?" I repeated, disbelief creeping into my voice. "What do you mean, leave? We can't just leave." He nodded slowly. "For your safety, you need to leave. The house will continue to fight. It's too far gone. It cannot be cleansed completely while you are here. You have to go." The room spun around me as his words sank in. "Leave? Could we leave? Could we really walk away from everything we had built, everything we had dreamed of? The house was our home. It had been our dream. And now, Father Lawrence was telling us to walk away, to leave it behind. But the fear in his eyes told me he wasn't joking. Whatever was in that house, whatever darkness had taken root, it wasn't something we could fight alone. We weren't prepared for this. We had never been prepared for this. Pack your things, Father Lawrence said. You must leave. Now. The weight of Father Lawrence's words hit me harder than I expected. Leave. He had said it so calmly, as though it was the only option. But leaving? Leaving everything we had worked for, everything we had built, was it really the right choice? The house, despite everything, still held so many memories. It was supposed to be our forever home, the place where our children would grow up, the place where we'd find peace and happiness. But the house was no longer just a building. It had become something else, something darker, and it wasn't going to let us stay, not without a fight. I turned to Emma, her face pale and her eyes wide with shock. She hadn't said anything yet. She was still processing what Father Lawrence had told us. Her hand gripped mine tightly, as though holding on to some semblance of normalcy, of control. We can't stay here anymore, can we? She whispered, her voice trembling. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to tell her that everything would be okay, that we could stay and fight, that we could fix it. But deep down I knew that we couldn't. Whatever was in this house, whatever had made it feel like a prison, it was beyond our control. And I wasn't willing to risk our safety anymore. Not after everything we'd been through. Not after the kids had started to feel it too. I nodded, my voice catching in my throat. We need to go. We didn't waste any time. Father Lawrence stayed with us, watching over us as we packed. He didn't say much more, just told us to move quickly. He mentioned that it was best if we didn't look back, that the more we lingered, the more we risked drawing the house's attention. It wasn't a simple matter of leaving. It was a matter of survival now. I gathered a few things, some clothes, the kids' favorite toys, the essentials. I couldn't bring myself to take anything more. Everything else felt like a weight I couldn't carry anymore. The house, the memories, everything we had once cherished was slipping through my fingers, disappearing